Hello. Well, okay. It's Zoe. Calm down. It's not big of a deal. We got it. I know her name. You know her name. We can write it down. It's going to be okay. Whatever. And she says, and then Lavern writes in her journal that Katie must have completely lost her mind because she left Zoe with Lavern. And the whole time they're together, Lavern is just trying to assuage her fears of not being able to take care of this child. Like, how do you wash a child when the water has to sit for 3 hours before you can actually put it on their body? Like, it's going to be freezing cold. She can't put this child in a freezing cold tub. What is she going to feed this child? Will she need to entertain this? What if this child starts screaming? Well, it turns out this child is very, very quiet and is very content to just sort of play by herself. She's given a couple of pens and a corner of the wall, and she's happy as can be to just be like doodling away. And Lavern starts thinking, why is she so quiet? Is she so quiet because she doesn't remember? Or is it because there's been a trauma in her life that's caused her to not speak? Or is she just young enough that she's not speaking yet? She doesn't know, and she's very analytical and she wants these answers. And she does explain to us that Katie said there was a plan 2 weeks ago. She's like, you don't remember when you came to visit me? And that's when we found the food that had been dropped. And so apparently the day she got home with the food, she had visited Katie. She just forgot. Because she says, like, even the mist that's like around as you're walking, like all of it. And she said, I'm gonna leave Zoe with you when I visit next time to take care of this mission. And she's like, and I'm not gonna fill you in again about what the mission is. I'll fill you in when I get back. Lavern says Katie's back and she's completely lost her mind. She has decided that she's leaving town tomorrow, and she wants Lavern to come with them. And she's like, absolutely not. You're out of your mind. We can't leave. It's not safe. And she says, well, but one of the guys in town has discovered the most incredible thing. There's a bar, meaning cell phone bar. And that they're all going to go together, and they're going to at least be able to get a message out to the rest of the world so that they'll know what's going on in this little town. And Lavern is just like, you're crazy, you're stupid, why would you do this? You're just gonna die. Don't, they have machine guns. There's a reason they have machine guns. They don't want you guys to pass through. This is never gonna work. And Katie keeps saying, we really wish she would come. We really wish she would come with us. And she keeps saying, I don't know, what made you think you would be able to talk me into it? And like, they both think about how they don't really like each other, but they both have skills the other might need and whatever. So she leaves with Zoe, and the power goes out in Lavern's house. And first she checks the fuses. It's such a big deal to check the fuses because of how dark it is and how her basement is kind of damp. So she's just really scared. To be afraid of water is just crazy. And she thinks, what am I going to do? And so when this all started, she had this like plan. She was like, well, I could take sleeping pills and, just a really sharp knife and some warm water. And, I even have some leftover Novocaine, I think. But now there's no warm water, and she realizes that you cannot kill yourself when you are so scared of dying, which is one of the most brilliant things I've read recently. You can't kill yourself when you're this scared of dying. So her new plan has been that if she hears a truck because she doesn't hear anything like that anymore. But if she hears a truck, it'll probably be military. And if it is, she's going to run out into the rain, and she's going to be in the rain for long enough that she's going to forget to be scared, and she's going to hopefully ask for help, and maybe they'll get her to help, and maybe they won't, and she'll forget everything, and then what's the difference anyway? She's got all of her windows closed and sealed. She doesn't want to heave the rain in. But one of the rooms in her house has a little bit of window still showing, and it's in the bathroom. And she goes to the bathroom. She writes in the journal, "Hallelujah. Oh my God, thank Christ, thank God. Oh my God, thank God. I cannot, this is the, hallelujah." Her house is like a little up and away from the town. So from her lot, she can see down into the town, and that window looks out to where she can see into the town, and there are still lights burning. So the electricity is out in her house, but it is not out in the neighborhood. It's not out in the neighborhood. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, there's hope. So she travels to town. Now, she describes what she puts on. She's got everything from like swimmer's goggles to, she's taping her ankles and wrists and covering, everything that she possibly can. She has, a tarp. She has not a tarp. She's got, hat and poncho and, everything to keep her as dry as possible. She pins a note to herself that says the electric grid, the electricity, something along those lines, that she won't forget why she's going to see Katie, right? And one of the things that Katie had said was, we can get to the center of town pretty easily without getting wet because of the tarped streets. And Lavern always says, I don't trust tarped streets. Like, just because there's plastic over you right this second doesn't mean that thing isn't going to overflow and fall over or spill everything. Like, that's not a very secure way of keeping dry. And Lavern is definitely more scared than she is hopeful. And Katie's more hopeful than she is scared. So that's one of like the main differences between the two of them. So that she makes her way to City Hall, and she's on the steps of City Hall, or no, she's under the vestibule maybe of City Hall, just sort of like watching the rain and trying to remember what her plan is, because she's gotten a little wet, so she's definitely forgotten some things. And she sees in the distance, she sees someone, and it's Katie, and she's writing as this is happening, and she's like, that's Katie, and she's carrying something with her. It's a bucket. It's a bucket full of, and stops. And then we get number 2. It's been a strange day. She says that she came to on the City Hall steps, and thank God Katie was there to, try to get the water off of me and get me inside where I could be, dry off. But I have to write everything down in this journal right now that she brought me. It's weird that it's only half a journal, and it's weird that nothing's written in it yet, but Katie says that I love my journal, and so I'm gonna, Katie tells her the plan again. She has a hard time believing that she would have agreed to any part of this plan. Going out into the rain is not something that Lavern wants or will do. And then she says there's even a note, like, pasted to my chest that says, trust Katie, go with Katie on her plan. Like it says, like, I wrote in my, it's really shaky, but I wrote this, someone wrote this and I let them put it on me. So I must have been convinced that we should go to this. So they do fight about the plan, because Lavern is like, I don't know how you ever would have talked me into something like this. And the more time that Lavern spends with Zoe and the more she looks at Zoe, and then she's got these little moments where she's like, oh, she wears her hair just like mine. I wonder who did her hair for her. I'm sure the reason it looks just like Lavern's is because Lavern did it. Then she says things like, she looks so much like me. Like, I just keep looking at this little girl and I see so much of me. And that makes me wonder if this is her grandchild. And that's why the two of them were buddied up, but that they've both forgotten that, or maybe one forgot it and one didn't, or maybe I'm just completely speculating. Could be wrong. But Lavern starts to really worry about Zoe and really, she worries about like, if she even gets a little wet, she doesn't have a lot of memories, like that's could be really, really dangerous for a small child. And she really wants to save her and she really wants to help. She's trying to convince Katie to not go. But when it's time for them to go, Lavern stays at Katie's house. And at first she's like, okay, I'm going to go back to my home and I'm going to, then she says, you know what? No, I'm going to stay here. I am going to sit down and I am going to listen because there are going to be gunshots. Because I am sure when this mob of people gets to the border, there's going to be gunshots and these people are all going to die. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait until I hear them. She's like, she doesn't want to hear the shots, but she needs to hear the shots. This is when we get this incredible idea, which I think I mentioned a little earlier, that Katie believes in hope over survival and Lavern believes in survival over hope. So Lavern stays where she's safe right now, and Katie is willing to go out and try because she has hope. Now, which one is going to be which one's going to survive with that way of thinking is kind of the message of this story, I think. Lavern also has a really interesting idea that I could certainly spend an entire class period, if not, a unit in a class, discussing the idea that she thinks, is it possible that Allowsville was supposed to be a paradise of innocence? That this is just a failed experiment that was supposed to bring us innocence and the paradise that comes with innocence. There's a bit, woo, I don't know how you would do that, but interesting, right? So she keeps getting distracted while she's waiting for the gunshots. She keeps getting distracted about the kitchen being so messy. There's mud on the floor. There's, the floor is a mess. The rest of the house is spotless. I mean, it's spotless. But the kitchen is really, really messy. And she's like, what is if this was my place, I would never have just left one room messy. And then she thinks, well, the only reason that it would be messy is if there wasn't time to clean it. Which means that Katie brought Lavern in from the rain very recently. Like today, maybe. That's when Lavern goes over to the trash can in the kitchen and decides she's going to look through it and see what's in there. And wonders of all wonders, she finds the first half of her journal. She is so beyond pissed. Katie threw a bucket of water on her and then tried to convince her that what she wanted to do was not what she wanted to do. And the whole thing, wait a minute. She left and Lavern's power went out and she's an electrician. How much of this has been planned, right? Has this literally been, she made my electricity go out so that I would come to her for help, and then she hit me with the water knowing that I would forget that I didn't believe in her plan, and then She could convince me to go with them because they needed a doctor or for whatever reason. Or if I'm correct about the whole grandparent thing, maybe she wanted, who knows? But we do know for sure that she's been lying to Lavern. And she's really, really pissed off, but she doesn't read the journal in that moment because she finds it and then she hears the gunshots. So she doesn't get a chance to read it until later. Gunshots, stampede sounds. So what she gathers is that people came into view, the guards started shooting, the people turned around, started running, and, they stampeded sort of on each other, right? So Lavern goes after them to see what happened. She knew she couldn't stop them, but she stayed to hear the gunshots, so that she could say she was right. When she heard them, she felt really guilty and shameful. And so she headed out to check on the people. Maybe they needed their neighborhood doctor. And she thinks about how she did everything she could to save herself. It was all about self-preservation. And then she admits that she was also thinking about you. I mentioned earlier that this journal is written to someone, a very specific someone. She says that there's a lot of dead bodies, blood, the tarps are knocked over. She crosses over and passes by all sorts of dead bodies. She decides she's going to let herself forget. She's going to let herself get wet so she forgets what all of this is, and then she sees movement. The movement are men covered in industrial plastic suits. Lavern hides behind a garbage can, and then in the garbage can. And the border guards, who she describes as black rubber, gas-masked, armed, are moving collectively. She watches them take some of the bodies. Some are still alive. Some are definitely dead. She wonders, is this some sort of sample size? Is this for testing? She stays in the garbage can long enough that it makes, her hip hurt, her shoulder hurt, her knee hurt. But the rubber guards never come over to her where she's hiding, and they march into town. And she starts to think, I wonder how many times this has happened. How can you trust anything when you just keep forgetting? Do things just keep happening over and over again? If we forget our history, we relive it. We all know that. Is there actually a truth, or only what we think we know? This little book with such big philosophical thoughts and ideas. So she calls it dumb luck that the rubber guards, as she calls them, don't come over to where she hid, but they don't. The guards all travel deeper into town, and Lavern is completely shocked to find that the border is left completely open and completely unguarded. The guards think everyone is dead. There's no reason to worry about them trying to get out because this is everyone. A little bit of fear passes because, she's getting misty, right? Water. And she realizes that Katie is going to be the reason that she survives. Dumb luck. If one guard had looked back, if she had broken something loudly, if a guard had hung back, she would have died. If she had stayed at her house, if she had stayed at Katie's, she would have died. She's standing under one of the one of the street tarps, and she's seeing the water run off of one of the edge of the tarps. And she sees the empty guard towers and their machine guns sitting completely useless, with no one to wield it. And she knows exactly where she needs to walk to get to the exit, to the border, to freedom. She kept losing seconds due to the mist, so her fear keeps leaving her. And she thinks she's going to make it. She's absolutely sure she is going to make it. But at that very last moment, and this is where you come into the story, there you were, huddled in a corner, shivering, somehow mostly dry. You were lucky. That's all there was to it. Dumb luck. There was a memory in her lizard brain to take care of this child. So Lavern went over and picked you up. She picked up Zoe. She was so pleased she could save this little girl. And all she felt was glory because of the forgetting. And then she says that she's seriously considered ending the story here, but instead decides she's going to share the full story. Lavern tells us that she knows she's not a kind person. If she were, she wouldn't have given this to you to read. Not the first part, and certainly not the end part. But Lavern has decided that the truth is greater than both of them, and if she's going to share the truth, it might as well be all of it. Katie limped out of the crowd. No bullet holes. All of her injuries were due to being caught in that stampede. She glared at Lavern with all the hate she could muster, and it was the most hate Lavern had ever felt coming towards her from another human being. And she says the words, "Give me back my child." Now, here's where hindsight, kicks our ass every time. Lavern knows now what she should have done was to turn around and walk out of the neighborhood. Katie would have followed, and then the three of them could have found a way to live their lives. But she didn't have the time to consider. So instead, Lavern tried convincing her with words. But all Katie could see was Zoe in Lavern's arms, her child, not in her own arms. Lavern considered putting her down and walking away, but she couldn't. She just couldn't. She cared way too much about Zoe already to walk away from both of them. She tells herself that she couldn't have stopped it. And it's possible that she couldn't have. The tarps that were covering the streets where they walked weren't safe because in that moment, the tarp above Katie tipped over and drenched her completely. She's bareheaded. The water literally filled her clothing. When she looked at Lavern, Lavern could see Katie was completely gone. In one fell swoop, she was gone. Lavern admits that this woman haunts her to this day, that she wishes there was something else she could have done. But in that moment, she just walked away. And that's when Zoe reached out over Lavern's shoulder and said her very first words. No. 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 Mama. Mama. Lavern found herself terrified. She needs to be quiet. The only way we're getting out of here and staying alive is if she stays quiet. And then Lavern reports 3 minutes in the rain did the trick. And that's where the story ends. For such a little story, it's so big. So big. I think it's definitely telling us that all people are flawed, even those people, even those who you think are so good, doctors or whatnot, people who are willing to share their knowledge and do what they can to keep you safe are still people that might just walk away, might just put your child in the rain for a few minutes, and how the difficult decisions, which are often the best decisions, are usually the hardest decisions, and knowledge of oneself is really what defines who we are. So if you've forgotten who you are, it's so heavy. But it was also just a really sort of neat read to hear the voice of Lavern come through and be like, like when she would forget things, and then she'd read her diary and her journal, and she'd be like, damn it, I knew better than to, why did I forget that? Or I didn't, ooh, like I messed that up, or I should have done this, or I'm just being a whiny old lady, um, is just fascinating. And the message of this story is different from most the message that you get in this kind of story. So I've said many times that Katie had hope over survival instinct and or fear, had hope over fear. And Lavern had fear over hope. And in this instance, fear over hope is what saved the day. So it was being fearful, being not willing to do the adventurous thing, not willing to do the possible thing that might save us, that actually ended up saving Lavern. She also takes a moment near the end there and she says, if it weren't for Katie, I never would have survived, because she actually got her. She wouldn't have left her house if the electricity didn't go out. She would never have made it to be close enough to the gunshots to go check everyone out, to see that the border was open, if it wasn't for Katie. So yes, the woman who had the fear is the one that made it out, but the only reason she made it out was because the woman who had hope pushed her. So there's, for such a little story with, very few characters and just a journal entries, it was really, really smart and deep. And I really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you're still here, I'd love a thumbs up. It's really helpful. If you've not subscribed yet, it's I would really appreciate a subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of my future uploads. I've got another book box on its way, so I will be opening that in the next week or so. And as always, do me a favor, be kind to yourself. You're the only self you're going to get. You are both precious and important. Don't forget that. I'll catch you next time. Bye. If you're interested in hearing the whole story, her most lucid, well, if you've not survived,